Welcome, welcome, welcome to another exciting episode of Wind Down with Kev. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us here on live stream, whether you're watching on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. We appreciate you. Also, big thanks to all of you that have already subscribed, hit the notifications button. We greatly appreciate you. Cannot do this without acknowledging our sponsors, Carol Media and Canopy Connect. Thank you so much. Please reach out to them for all things digital. So today we are going to the great state of Kansas, and we have an awesome guest. So excited to introduce the soon-to-be 5-year agent. She's an award-winning agent, only coming up on her 5th anniversary as an agent, but she is. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your warm hands together and let's give a warm Wind Down with Kev welcome to Laura Prey. Hey, Laura, welcome to the Wind Down with Kev podcast. How are you today?
I'm fabulous. It's my Friday, so 2 days before my birthday, and I'm going to the spa tomorrow. So I'm having a good day so far.
Life is good. Put happy birthday, Laura, in the comments. You've got a spa day. You've got a birthday. Let me do the math. That's February 22nd that recording is. That means that we have something in common. We are both Pisces. That's awesome. That is
Mm.
absolutely awesome. And I love the fact that this is your Friday and you're treating yourself to a nice spa day. Is this a birthday treat or is this something that you do often?
Every year around this time, me and three of my girlfriends do a spa thing together. And we kind of choose different places to go because we kind of are spa people. And so we're heading over to Jayhawk Land, which I try not to go anywhere near regularly. But I am heading into Jayhawk territory. And we're going to try out one of the spas there. So it should be nice. And then we'll pop over to Kansas City for some dinner and shopping or something.
I love it. Shout out to Kansas City. I think it's the best barbecue in the country. I've been there a few times. I've had the barbecue. Am I okay saying Kansas City is the best barbecue? Is there a Kansas argument on the other side of the Kansas City, the Missouri Kansas borderline?
Ooh, okay. So, fun fact, Kansas, I would say, has the best barbecue, but I'm going to say that the best barbecue is actually south of Kansas City, about 2 hours. So, a little known tiny town, 300 people, Williamsburg. It's my original home that I was born in. And fun fact, Johnny Carson used to have the ribs shipped from this tiny little barbecue joint in this little tiny town. He used to have them shipped to him in New York.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Shout out to Johnny C.
Yeah.
That's a big that's a big compliment. You'll have to ship them to me so I can see if I agree or disagree with that. Laura, introduce your award-winning background, but tell the people a little bit about you, something that I didn't say.
Oh gosh. Well, I am a mother of two, which wouldn't be that exciting. And, it'd be like, oh, you're a mom, you own a business, all that fun stuff. But I have one of my children is 10 almost. And then the next one is a baby. So I like to call myself an old mom, but he's trying to keep me young. So that's good. But I have a 17-month-old. Uh,
Outstanding.
and I kept him in the office with me. I brought him for the first year. So when people say, like, what do you feel like your turnaround time was? Like, how do you feel like your business has grown and everything? And I'm like, well, when you're doing two full-time jobs for a year, when he goes to daycare, you realize that you can literally accomplish anything if you can run a successful business and bring a baby to work. So, so I'm
I
currently
would
in that realm right now. Is a lot of parenting and child rearing. So spa days with the girlfriends are what keeps me sane, is what I would say.
it, it's neat and it makes sense. And congratulations on the 17-month-old. I think child rearing is both the hardest and the best work in the world. It takes time, take efforts, but the payoff is absolutely amazing. And to have a 10-year-old and a 17-month-old kind of sounds a little bit like me. I have three only children. They're pretty far apart, 6 years
Yes.
between number one and number two. And between one and three, there's 18 years. So definitely
Oh my gosh.
three only children. So I can relate there a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. They say I think it's after 8 years apart, then you kind of have a oldest child again. So they're going to have youngest child attributes and oldest child attributes. And I'm like, I have that too. So, and I know me, I'm pretty headstrong. So it's going to be an adventure, is what it's going to be. But we'll be all right.
I loved it. Well, you've journeyed the first part. You did a year and some change bringing the baby to work. I cannot imagine anything more challenging, and the ability to work without a baby there. It has to be, the job has to be extremely easy, for lack of a better word. No days here at Allstate are easy, but that has to be a
Right.
little bit easier than doing both. So, Laura, you and I talked offline a little bit about your back journey.
Mhm.
22 years overall with the company, but five as an agent. Talk
Mhm.
about phase one, what it was like, how you got started, and then talk about the transition.
So I'm actually a legacy. So I'm a legacy agent in the fact that my father was an agent with Allstate back in the Sears days, like under the escalator. So I grew up like hanging out in a Sears back in the early mid 80s. I was hanging out like, well, he put me in the closet to play while he was, at the counter. But so it was kind of an interesting transition because Allstate clearly has a lot of transitions that happen. And he was a part of the transition of changing them from employees to standalone, own their own business agents. So
Yes.
that's kind of been a interesting, it's like full circle where it's then I'm going into it too, and there's all the changes, and he can be like, let me tell you about all the different changes that happened in my 30 some years. um so I went to work with him right before I graduated college. I went to work with him. He needed some help. He does a lot of ministry work where he travels internationally, and so he knew that I would be consistent. And I was in that phase of like, what do I want to do with my life, little did I
Yes.
know I was going to be actually really good at it. Like I was good at an insurance, I was good at sales and education and everything. So while I always say nobody dreams when they're a kid, like I want to grow up to be an insurance agent, like it sort of kind of happens to you. It really panned out in the way it was supposed to be. Um, so when he sold his agency, he sold it to Brian Green. And Brian was a guy who did marketing, actually. He would do outside marketing and he would come in and see dad as part of his job. And one day he just came in and said, I want to buy your agency.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And so that happened. And so I stayed with the agency. And so it was me and Brian, and we kind of did our thing we had one agency, we grew to a second agency. And then in 2 months, we took over two more agencies. So very quickly, we ended up with four locations, and
Wow.
I did all of it for the most part. And then as we got really big and we became mega and all that fun stuff, I transitioned more into like training and sales managerial stuff. I mean, I did everything. You imagine it, I did it, including down to new locations where I would pick out all the carpeting and tile and desks and everything. So I did that, but my family is very entrepreneurial. So
Okay.
almost everybody in my extended family owns their own business. Everyone in my personal nuclear family, we all own our own businesses. And so it was always kind of in my blood, as well as, when you're an employee, which is great. I had a great time being an employee, but I saw that it was hard for people to have to decide what things to go to for their kids and make kind of those decisions.
Yes.
And while I still have to do that as a business owner, I wanted more ability to do that and kind of not feel bad about it, basically being like, no, I did this. I wanted the ability to bring my baby to work with me, like some of those things. So he always knew that I had
Yes.
that, feeling. And so we had talked years before of like when it was the right time, he would sell me one of the locations and I would kind of go off onto my own and he would kind of help support by just, being a backup for me of being like, please tell me why I did this. Like, explain it to me again.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
and it's been great. And it's funny because he came to me, we had lunch like a month ago. And while we were having lunch, he, I said, when you pick me up, do you want me to give you all the stuff that I came up with, like all my ideas of what I'm going to do for 2025? He's like, yeah, just print those off for me so I can take a look at them. So we really have.
Laura, I love your I was going to say, I love your answer. I was literally talking to an agent yesterday that's thinking about hiring. And the conversation we had is that the best person to hire is someone who, in 2 to 3 years, wants to be an agent. And
Yeah.
so, in addition to whatever the compensation arrangement is, if you're looking ahead to ownership one day, you're going to gravitate and embrace the opportunity a little bit different because you're walking past the base, you're walking past whatever other rewards or remuneration there is, you're thinking about well in advance, what would I do the same? What would I do differently? And the reason
Mhm.
I'm here is because I want to understand that. What would you say to that? That was that good advice or very different, on
Oh,
point or off base?
I would say 100%. I mean, the best people to one of the things that Brian and I always we got along about, but there was always, sometimes he'd have to be like, listen, my name's on the door. And what it took me a long time to realize,
Yes.
because with him, I was able to like grow up into leadership. But what I learned
Yes.
was I had a lot of ownership. So my name wasn't on the door, but felt a sense of ownership as a person who wanted it. I had a lot of respect and a lot of loyalty, and I wanted it to be really good. And if you can, frankly, I think Brian thinks I was a pretty good, pretty exemplary employee in that way. And I mean, we've even joked, he's like, literally, whatever salary, whatever days off, if you want to work from home, I would take you back tomorrow, type of thing. And I think it's one of
Wow.
those that
Wow.
I had a sense of ownership over it. And I think people need that. If they have that buy-in where they feel like, okay, my name's not on the door, but maybe it is in invisible ink underneath it, then those people are going to
Yes.
watch your back and they're going to come in going, I want the office to look nice. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this up, even though that's not my job or whatever. So I 100% in a perfect world, my next hire would be somebody who's like, I'd love to take over this agency so you can maybe go do some other things that interest you as well. And then that way you can just be the business owner who works on the business and not as much in the business as I do right now. So 100%. I
I
think that's
I
great
I
advice.
I love it. And I love that you said two really powerful things that people want me to ask you. I can kind of sense when those jewels are really dropped and I have to dig further. You said this allowed you to grow into leadership. Being a leader of an agency doesn't come with a book of instructions. There's rules and guidelines that we need to abide by, but
Mhm.
leadership is something different. And so, can you expand upon what you mean by grow into leadership?
I just I feel like when you grow into leadership and you start all over when you then take over the business ownership, right? It becomes a whole new thing.
Yes.
So I did it for, 16 plus years in one realm, and then I had to turn around and start over again and kind of take what I learned and then go, okay, now how do I do this as the person who can do the hiring and the firing? Before I could suggest it. Now I have to be the one who decides it and pulls the trigger on it, right? So I
Yes.
just think that growing into leadership, I mean, you have to learn about which battles to go into. I mean, back in the
Yes.
day, it was so funny. Brian would sit down with me about my reviews and he'd say, all right, like you're a little harsh sometimes. Like you go at employees, like because I had such a sense of ownership that it was like, listen, let's do it my way until you tell me a way that works better because my
Yes.
way's been working for a long time. And he's like, I think
Yes.
people want to know that they have the ability to do it a different way. And it took me a long time to be like, oh, not everybody's like me. Like
Yes.
I'm a completely different worker than maybe XYZ is. And I have to recognize that they're not going to come into work the same way I'm going to come into work. It's not wrong. It's just that's how they do it.
Yes.
Um, we talk a lot in my friend circle about everybody has a different size plate. So when you say, well, my plate's really full, we kind of joke like, some people's plates might be a dessert plate. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just that's how much
No.
they can handle,
Yes.
and then the joke with my husband is he's like, you don't even have a dinner plate. Like you have the charger that's under the dinner plate. Like, and then so many people get used to me being able to take on so much that like my goal for 2025 was delegate because I am not a delegator.
Yes.
I'm like, I know how to do it. I'll just finish it because I can do it faster. And that's not
No.
me providing good leadership, right? If I'm
No.
going to do everything myself.
Yes. That's
So yeah,
another leadership growth opportunity. Go from doing it to delegating it. But that's
yeah.
another podcast for another day. So let me ask you this: you're doing this for a while. What do you love about being an Allstate agent? What do you love the most?
Oh my gosh, the education of it is really what I've always loved. Who doesn't love saving somebody money, right? So that's easy. That somebody said something at one of the forums that I went to that was like, if it was easy, everybody'd do it, right? So of
Mhm.
course, everybody can call up Progressive and save X amount of dollars potentially, right? So saving money is great. I always want to be able to save people money. But I want to go the extra step and make sure that I always say to people, if you leave this conversation knowing one more thing about insurance than you did when you came in, then I did my job right. So that's really what I want. So I really like the education piece. I want to make sure people understand how the little nuances work. I mean, I had a friend of mine's house burned down to the ground in the last month and he was with Progressive, which is fine.
Wow.
Like I mean, everybody's got home insurance, so I'm glad he has home coverage. But he had already called them to work on the claim, but he called me for me to explain the coverage to him. And he's like, I know you don't have to do this, but like,
Yes.
I just trust you to actually tell me what this stuff means. And that was huge to me. And now he's going to be buying a new house and he's like, "Oh, I'm never going with the big box store again," type of thing. Like I need somebody who I can locally speak to who's going to shoot me straight type of thing. So really
Laura,
it's
you
really
have
the
given
education.
me, go ahead.
I just mean the education is hands down the thing that I
Laura,
like.
you have given me no, I love it. And you've given the reason why I'm doing these 50 podcasts with 50 agents in 50 different states. That's the singular reason right there. I'm in the business approaching 4 decades, but there's some things that are very unique about buying insurance in Kansas that I don't know. So if
Mm,
I were a big box or a .com, I'd have no business selling insurance in Kansas because there's some unique risks. And you
right.
want to be able to hold someone's hand and walk them through when the house burns to the ground. So help me with this conversation. Each person I talk to, no matter what state they're in, there's some unique risks. So,
Yeah.
talk to me about some unique things in Kansas that's really important that you make sure you educate and prepare your clients for.
Oh man. Well, one, we're at the top of Tornado Alley and I live near, so our community is within 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes of an army base. So tons of transitioning people, right? Tons of people moving in and
Mhm.
out at all times. So that education piece is important, especially with the military people, because they're told 1,000 different things every 3 years and they've constantly got to remember what all that stuff is.
Yes.
But the number one thing that they're nervous about is they're like, are there going to be tornadoes? And so that's always one of those that it's like, okay, listen, like you're going to probably hear about more tornadoes than you're actually going to experience, like you're
Yes.
going to hear about them. Don't let that be the thing that freaks you out. Like we're going to have plenty of tornado watches and warnings, and you just need to make sure you've got a safe place. But the likelihood of it really affecting you, not the end of the world. What is going to affect you is going to be wind and hail. Because, fun
Yes.
fact, if you didn't know, we're a little house on the prairie, right? So
Yes.
we have nothing to keep us from the elements.
Yes.
So wind and hail is a huge thing, so huge in Kansas that our state doesn't actually allow, the insurance commissioner does not allow insurance companies to charge for wind and hail claims
Wow.
because we are such like this is going to happen every year. We're going to have a ton of catastrophes. Um, so that's the number one thing we talk about. So right now, obviously, everybody's discussing roofs and what it costs to replace roofs and all that fun stuff. But it feels like in the Midwest, that conversation is, I mean, I'm having it every hour with people explaining to them about roof coverage and how it works and how to prepare yourself. And I'm like, just so you know, the most likely thing to happen, they're like, well, it's going to be hail. And I'm like, correct. Like, that is the number one thing that's going to happen.
I love it. And I love your local expertise that you can say that, you can talk through and make sure they get the right coverage before it happens, as opposed to being surprised or being in the position of your friend with a house that's burnt to the ground. Just going back to him for a second, what were the two or three things about his policy that you explained to him that he did not understand?
So, a lot of people don't realize that when let's say worst case scenario, your house gets taken out, which I always say it burns to the ground or taken out by tornado, because that's the easiest thing to say to somebody, that they can wrap their head around, right? Um, I always tell people you do not have to rebuild your house in the same location. You can
Okay.
clean that lot off and you can sell it, but you're going to come over here and you could go buy 80 acres somewhere and build your house out there. Like, you do not have to build that. That's a huge deal. A lot of people do not realize that they don't have to build it. The other thing they don't realize is that they don't have to build the same house. The amount of people who have two-story homes who are like, oh, I'm getting a little older, I wouldn't want this house. And I'm like, well, if your house burns to the ground, you don't have to rebuild the same house. Like, you can
Right.
rebuild a completely different type of house as long as it's like, kind, and quality. And then the other thing I definitely had to go over with him was I had to go over the additional, like, the BISREL, the extended
Yes.
limits. He didn't
Yes.
understand how that worked. So he was like, well, I see it's on here, but what's that mean? And I went through explaining that to him, and in an odd turn of events, they were already trying to sell their home. So their home
Okay.
was for sale and they had already found a new house to buy. So it was this weird scenario that they're already closing on their new house, quicker than they would have been, because of the fact that their house burnt down in a strange, odd turn of events. But, that's what happens in insurance, weird, odd, strange things.
I love it. I love it. You and I can talk insurance language and jargon, but for any consumer listening that doesn't understand, expand on Basil for a minute, just to talk about the extended limits.
So I'm a human and you're a human, and we're putting it into a computer program. We're putting in the square footage, we're putting in the bathrooms and the quality of the bathrooms. Are they customized? Are they builder's grade? I'm trying to ask, I'm putting in how big their garage is and what kind of windows and ceilings and all the different stuff, right? But I'm a human, so I'm going to put it in to the best of my ability. The people I'm talking to are going to put it in the best of their ability as lay people who don't really understand insurance, and then I'm going to use the county information. But
Yes.
what if 4 years down the line, and even though I've done policy reviews and even though I've kind of reached out, that person has now finished their basement and they didn't tell me, or,
Mhm.
whatever. So there's going to be things on a policy that has changed, a person's house that has changed. And if they have a major catastrophe and they go, well, my basement was finished, then that extra 20% is going to kind of kick in as a buffer to take care of some of those things that could have changed along the way. Or maybe we just missed altogether because we're humans and the computer program told us one thing and we thought it, whatever. You could miss a bathroom, like, let's say.
Mhm.
Um, so that additional 20% is going to kick in if there's just differences in building costs. Think about COVID. I mean,
Yes.
my house, for a perfect example, in 1 year, once they got the replacement cost estimator figured out at my renewal, my house typically would go up. The property insurance adjustment might go up 5,000. So maybe my house is going to cost 5 grand more to build in 1 year than it is in the next. My
Right.
house that year went up $70,000
That's a big number.
because the building cost changed that
Yeah.
dramatically. And really, I mean, I built my house. And so when I have people come to me for building a house, like, I'm kind of an expert on it. And I can tell them, this is what it's going to cost to build this house in this area.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, so basically I call it the buffer zone. And some people definitely want it. And there's some people that I say, I don't know if this is something you're going to need, and we have that conversation. A lot of times it has to do with age. You know, there's people who say, who are in their 80s. I just talked to one earlier this week and I said to him, would you rebuild your house? And he's like, no, I'm going to go live in an apartment. And I was like,
Yes.
well, then don't pay for this coverage because you do not need this. You're never
Yes.
going to this is never going to get like put into the equation if your house burns to the ground. And so he didn't take it, you know, and I'm like, that was the right move for you. But for a lot of other people, that's something that they definitely need.
More evidence of the beauty of your expert knowledge and experience. So pre-call, you talked about you're coming up on your fifth anniversary. Would that be March 1st?
March 1st.
So so you start your agency March 1st, 2020, and 2 weeks
Yeah.
later, the world ends.
Yeah.
What was that transition like?
Well, I had just had beautiful custom cabinets and a completely remodeled office that was now decorated by a lady and not a man. So it was beautiful. And I had new staff, and they said, "You got to go home." And I just was like, "What? Like, you want me to go home? Like, but nobody knows what they're doing."
Yes.
Um, so we did 2 months at home, and then we came
Okay.
back. And luckily, the way my office is structured, we all had a lot of space. So we could
Good.
easily space out, and it wasn't really too much of a concern. So we were home for 2 months, and we
Okay.
made it work. It worked. It wasn't ideal, but it worked.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's stay with insurance in Kansas. How hard is it to get a license? Or for someone that's listening to this podcast, they love everything you're saying. They like to come work for you.
Mhm.
How hard is it to get a license and get started in Kansas?
So, just like any other state, you got to pass a test, right? So, you've got to
Mhm.
take a property casualty test. There's obviously additional lines that kind of come with that if you've taken it. You know, you can take a test that's only for property or only for casualty, but really in the end, you got to have both to be able to do what you got to do in the offices. One of the things that's a little bit different, I don't know how many states require this, but we didn't back in the day 100 years ago when I became an agent, but now they require you to have fingerprints done. So
Wow.
to speed the process up, what I have learned over time is if I have somebody out there studying for a test and they're like, okay, I want to move forward with this. So I kind of help them. I typically, as of right now, use WebCE. I have a pretty good, I feel like that program is very workable. Um, but if they're out there studying, I'll say to them, hey, one of your days that you're studying, run over to the next town and do your fingerprints, because for some reason we have to, there's no place to do your fingerprints here in town, which is, we're a nice sized city, so I don't know why that is, but we have to drive 45 minutes to Topeka to do it.
Wow.
Couldn't tell you why. um, so I tell people, run and do those, and that way you're ahead of the game by one step and you have it done. And basically, once you do your fingerprints, it kind of just sits off in la la land, like the state knows that it's there, but you haven't actually done anything. And
No,
then once you take your test and you pass it, you call up, you know, the insurance commissioner's office, and then it kind of marries the two things together, and they run their stuff and do all the fun things.
I
So
love it.
it's pretty
This
easy.
there's so much I can say about that merger of fingerprints and government work and getting to where you needed to go at the pace we work. But I won't go. It doesn't help anybody. Um, March of 2020, you build a beautiful retail location designed by a woman, not a man.
Yes.
And fast forward to today, you're
Mhm.
very digital. I love your presence on social media. When you think of your agency, you think of your journey starting with your dad in Sears, the agencies you helped Brian build, where you are today. Do you think of your agency as a retail business, a digital business, or some combination of both?
Oh, that's a good question. I would probably say that I would probably still be considered retail, but I play in the digital market, and that's one of my 2025 goals. One of my 2025 goals is to really brand the agency as the agency. Like, I leaned on Allstate for a long time, and that's fine and that's good, and they've obviously got a great reputation. But now when I sponsor my kids' baseball and softball teams, I want it to say my business name and have my business logo, because I want people to call me and want to choose Allstate because of me, not necessarily just because of Allstate. So I'm really working on branding. I'm trying to make myself one goal a month to move the needle forward on branding my agency. So logo was the first month, was January. My own business cards was the second month, you know, and then this next month I'm working on like swag and things like that, just to have some of that stuff. And I would like to use it as giveaways for our anniversary uh, week anniversary party that we're going to have.
I love it. So I'm going to ask about that, but I think I looked. I think I know. Uh, Tell me what your logo is.
So my logo is a fox.
Yes.
So, in a way that it's a spiritual thing for us. A fox is our family animal. I don't know if a lot of families have mascots, but my family does, and it has to do with my husband's journey to Christ, and so the fox is a really big deal to us. And in a probably we kind of say occasionally foxes aren't something that you see all the time, right?
Right.
So if we see a fox, we generally feel like, oh, we should have our eye open. We feel like something's coming. And typically something has been. It feels like a good omen for us. Um, and so I just said, everybody has whatever they want in their on their logos. It doesn't always have to make sense to the general public. It can be whatever you want. And so I just said, I'm doing it. Like, and frankly, I think that it's a great ministry if people ask me what it means. I mean, that gets
That's a
a lot of
conversation.
conversation.
It's a huge conversation starter. Now let's talk about your business name. You have the best business name that I could ever imagine in this business. But talk about your business name and how you plan to brand yourself.
So part of also was I didn't want, I ended up for my tagline using Chat GTP, which I know you love. And we did attributes of a fox that would coincide with an insurance agency. And so then we kind
Yeah.
of pieced it together. Because, when your last name is Prey, like I do get calls. I mean, this week we wrote someone who said, well, I liked you guys, but I felt like her name was like a really good omen. And so people will choose to go with me sometimes just because my last name's Prey, which
Yes.
I'll take it. Like I am
We'll
mad
take
about it.
it. We'll take it. What closes the deal? We'll take it.
Yeah. But Pray Family, actually, Brian suggested it. I had called him and said, I'm trying to work through what my agency names could be. And I don't know if I wanted to say Laura necessarily. I want it to be able to grow. Like, if eventually my children want to take this over, I want it to continue to be a legacy, kind of like I am. And so
Mhm.
I just wanted something that was all encompassing. It is a family thing. I mean, I'm downtown Manhattan. I mean, I'm on the main drag. I have a huge plate glass window. I decorate for every holiday. I mean, a ton of people will walk past. I would say almost every day somebody walks past and looks at all the decorations, and then they'll look up and look to see what the business is. They kind of look up and read what all the letters are and put it together, which is great because that means I get walk-ins and all sorts of questions. They'll come in and they'll say, "Are you related to these praise?" I pretty much always am, so that works out. Um, but it's my kids and my husband and I who are here on a Sunday decorating for Christmas, and so it's a family agency, and I just really wanted that to be what we were conveying in that.
Who doesn't want to be associated with the Pray Family Agency? Considering that we sell a promise, we pray that you deliver the best logo in the business, all the best in your branding. Lord, talk a little bit about, you mentioned sponsorship. Talk about some of the things that you're doing in the community.
Well, I sponsor all my kids' sports teams. So I live in a smaller town of about 5,000, which is about 15, 20 minutes from Manhattan proper. So I'm in the Little Apple, is what we're known for. Manhattan, the Little Apple. That is a real
Okay.
thing. They do advertise it that way. Every business around this place is named the Little Apple something. So they really leaned into it, let me tell you. Um, so in my small town, I sponsor any of the things. There's a community theater there, which we have a very historic theater that was built. It has a really great like story to it of how it was built and why it was built in this tiny little town. Um, and it has maintained itself through the years and been rebuilt. And so I sponsor that as well because I'm a really big person about the arts and getting kids involved and all of that. So I sponsor um, the theater. I sponsor sports teams. I sponsor my husband's and I pickleball team. I mean, it's just the two
Nice.
of us, but I'm sponsoring it. And I've also, I'll sponsor a lot of the different teams of, I mean, my summer softball team. I was on a summer softball team for 15 years, co-rec, me and my friends. And when I became a business owner, I was like, listen, I'll handle the t-shirts. And we played an hour
Yes.
away. We played in a teeny tiny town of 1,000 people. And we would drive down every Sunday. We'd load our family up and we'd drive down just so we could hang out with our friends and play an hour's worth of softball. And so, yeah, so I have my name all over the place, is what I would tell you.
So I'm getting a league of their own vibes. I'm getting a league of their own vibes.
Listen, my husband is the athlete in this family. I'm the I like to say I can hit, but I'm the catcher. So if you know anything about co-rec
Okay.
softball, you put the worst person as the catcher, and I'm fine with that.
Well,
I am there for comic relief only.
say worst person, but just the athleticism required to bend down for a couple of hours. You're definitely in a league of your own that I have no business being a part of.
Fair.
But your description on your website, you reference some athleticism. I seen fit and strong nutrition coach. I saw a rugged maniac 5K obstacle race. Any
Oh yeah.
truth to that, or is that just social media hype?
Oh no. That I mean, I well, in my current situation, I'm feeling more fluffy because the fact that I have a 17-month-old. But so I'm not getting into all of those races like I was before. But yeah, I've done. I actually went to Nashville with some friends and we did the country music half marathon.
Nice.
And then I've done not a Spartan, maybe it was Rugged Maniac. It's hard to remember. Um, but yeah, I've done tons of those types of things for sure. Any of that stuff that I can do with a friend where we can motivate each other to kind of go out there and do something a little difficult that we wouldn't do on our own, I'm going to do. So for sure.
And add Nashville and country music to it. I hope you kept a couple of days to enjoy downtown Nashville and hang out a little bit on
Oh,
Broadway.
yes. I had so much fun. I took my best friend. My husband is an educator. He's a principal, an elementary school principal. And so August is not the right time for him to travel, which stinks for him, but great for my friends because then they get to take turns going on trips with me. And so we had an absolute blast. We hung out with a ton of agents and yeah, and we are both big live music people. We're big singers. And so we did karaoke one night, which was great, with a bunch of the other agents. And so yeah, we tore it up for sure, I would tell you.
We got some agents I've been talking to. We got quite a few musicians, more than I was aware of, that's doing the all state thing and can handle their own in the karaoke situation. So, Laura, you're running a fabulous agency. You're mom of a young, beautiful family. How do you wind down after the business day, after the mom day? How do you wind down at the end of the day? How do you decompress?
Oh man. Well, I decompress throughout the day. I would say one thing I do throughout the day. I don't know if you've heard of Marco Polo, but when you are a busy mom and you don't get to see your friends a lot because of the fact of where we all live in different cities and states and everything. So I don't even know. It's been like 9 years, but we have been using an app called Marco Polo, which is I refer to as video texting. And so I this is how I communicate. I don't use the phone a lot, like as in to use the phone and talk on the phone because I talk
Okay.
on the phone all day.
Talk. Okay.
But I video text my friends throughout the day. So when I was came on here, I was listening to one of them tell me some story, and she lives in Missouri. And then I have a friend
Nice.
who's down in Arizona, and she's telling me some story. So a lot of times, my winding down is on the way home. I'm listening to 15 messages from my friends and just catching up with their lives. Uh, and that probably doesn't sound great to some people, but I am an extrovert. Like the joke is I never have to be alone except I do need some time away from my kids, but beyond that, I could always be with someone. So just hearing what other people are doing. And then I like to finish it off with my family and I are big game players. We play all sorts of cards. You pick a card game, I
Okay.
play it. So I even came home last night and it was like,
Okay.
"Mom, you're here, let's play." I mean, I didn't even get my shoes off and it was like, "I've already got your cards ready for you." I was
Nice.
like, "Okay." So that's a big decompressor for us.
Wow. Wow. I think Marco Polo is someone in history who I don't recall, but I'm used to being on vacation at hotels where kids play Marco Polo. So
Yeah.
that's where my mind went. But the Marco Polo app, it's new to me and it may be new to many of my listeners and viewers. So, Laura, you have been a fabulous guest. Before we wind down to my last two questions, is there anything that you would like to share that you're working on, you want to talk about that I didn't ask you? So, Kevin should have asked me this. This is your opportunity to share it.
Oh. Well, something I'm working on in the agency is I'm working on our 5-year anniversary week. One of the things that we have is a really good, thriving downtown. And I went to a lot of the other businesses and they've been donating items. So that way I can do a lot of giveaways. So I'm really trying to up my digital game, like you said.
Yes.
Um, and so so that's one of the big things I'm doing. I just had one of my staffers, she's been with me since the beginning. She actually came with me from Brian's, which again
Okay.
was all part of the plan. And she had her 5-year anniversary. And little did she know that I had planned a whole party. So we did a surprise party and some different stuff to commemorate that. Um, so I'm mostly working on that and to try to get my child to say, like, I love you or something like that. So those are the things I'm really working on right now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Congratulations and all the best in advance. You've shared a few things about your anniversary week. I think that's awesome. I think there's some great takeaways. I think we should celebrate every milestone
Mhm.
along the way. Just get together for good occasions. Last question. This is Wind Down with Kev, but it's also the Dream Chaser podcast. So I always like my guests to share encouraging words, whether it's someone that's an agent like us or thinking about joining this industry or just chasing some other dream. Can you give somebody just some encouraging words?
Oh, encouraging words. I mean, I really liked when, like I mentioned earlier, when somebody said if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? And
Yes.
so, uh, as a person who is willing to take on hard things, I think that we just always have to be willing to push ourselves a little bit harder than we think we can go. I know in parenting, you're always trying to explain that to your kid, like, listen, I know it seems hard, but like, you can make this bed. Like, you can make it right, okay? Not the version that you call making your bed type of thing. So I would just always say to people, like, of course it's hard. Like, you want it to be hard. Like, if it
Yes.
wasn't hard, then every Joe Schmo on the street would do what it is we're trying to do here. But we're trying to create a legacy. And if you keep your eye on that and not just think about right now and today, but think about 5 years and 10 years from now and what you want that to look like and what you want your life to look at, then I feel like that can keep you motivated longer.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's not hard because we have to do it. It's hard because we get to do it and we
Right.
asked for it. And that's a different
Yeah.
outlook. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Wind Down with Kev. Please put some major clap your hand emojis in the comments for my wonderful guest, Laura Prey. Absolutely fantastic, amazing guest. Dropped a lot of Jews, dropped some new information on us with a way to wind down with the Marco Polo app. A lot of information about our 5-year anniversary. If you got an anniversary, you're not celebrating, celebrate. Give
Yes.
yourself your flowers while you can. Love what you shared about branding. Can't close the podcast without thanking my sponsors, Carol Media and Canopy Connect. If anybody is thinking about branding in that space, those are two companies that really can help you a lot along the way. Lastly, if you enjoyed the content that we shared here today, please click on the subscribe and notification button below so you can get this content sent to you right away, filled with tips and wonderful information. But thank you so much for tuning in and watching another episode of Wine Down with